It was a sunny May morning in Ouagadougou in 2025 when IBRAHIM TRAORÉ received a call that would change everything. On the other end of the line was Jake Sullivan, the American National Security Advisor. President Traoré, President Trump would like to invite you to a live interview on CNN International. It will be broadcast globally at 8:00 p.m. Washington time. IBRAHIM paused, gripping the phone tightly. At 35, he had faced many challenges as leader of Burkina Faso, but never anything of this magnitude. "What is the subject of the interview?" he asked, walking to the window of his office in the presidential palace. "African development and relations with the United States," Sullivan replied. "President Trump would like to discuss future partnerships." IBRAHIM knew that behind this diplomatic courtesy lay a more complex agenda. Trump was under pressure because of Africa's growing partnerships with China and Russia. "I accept the invitation," IBRAHIM finally said. "But on one condition, I want this to be a dialogue between equals, not an interview where I am just asked questions." Sullivan hesitated. "I will convey your condition to the president." After hanging up, IBRAHIM immediately summoned his staff. Moussa Kabore, his chief of staff, rushed in. "Mr. President, I heard about the call. This is risky. Everything in politics is risky. Moussa, but this is our chance to show the world who we really are." IBRAHIM knew that this interview would be watched by hundreds of millions of people. This was Burkina Faso's chance to position itself on the global stage for good. The presidential palace was abuzz with activity. IBRAHIM had assembled his elite team to prepare for the most important interview of his political career. Dr. Alance Urago, the foreign minister, was spreading documents across the conference room table. "Mr. President, Trump will try to put us on the defensive. He will ask questions about our repro with Russia and China." IBRAHIM nodded, studying the papers. "And what is our official position?" "Simple national sovereignty. Burkina Faso has the right to choose its partners based on our interests," replied Fatimata Sawadogo, the economy minister. Yakuba Sawadogo, the communications advisor, raised a crucial point. "President Trump is known for interrupting and trying to dominate conversations. How do we deal with that?" IBRAHIM smiled slightly with facts, calm and dignity. "He may have experience, but we have the truth." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Trump was in a similar meeting at the White House. This young African is gaining a lot of international attention. He told aides, "We need to show who's in charge." Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned, "Mr. President Traoré is articulate and well-prepared. We should not underestimate him. He's 35. I have decades of negotiating experience," Trump replied confidently. Back in Ouagadougou, IBRAHIM reviewed economic statistics for Burkina Faso. Since 2022, the country had recorded 3% GDP growth, a 31% reduction in extreme poverty, and the construction of 100 kilometers of paved roads. "These numbers are our ammunition," he told staff. "Trump can try to belittle us, but the facts speak for themselves." Adjara Traoré entered the room with tea for everyone. "Are you nervous?" she asked her husband. "Determined," IBRAHIM replied. "This interview could change the world's perception of Africa forever." At 7:30 p.m. in Washington, the CNN International studios were buzzing with activity. Technicians were adjusting cameras, producers were testing satellite connections, and anchors were reviewing last-minute questions. Anderson Cooper, the network's veteran anchor, would moderate this historic meeting between two leaders with completely opposite styles. "In 30 minutes, we'll have President Trump here in Washington and President Traoré live from Ouagadougou," Cooper announced to viewers. "This promises to be one of the most important interviews of the year." And in Burkina Faso, a makeshift studio had been set up in the presidential palace. IBRAHIM was adjusting his blue tie, carefully chosen to convey seriousness and professionalism. Burkina Bay technicians were working alongside CNN experts to ensure perfect image and sound quality. Audio test president. The technical director said IBRAHIM spoke clearly. "Ouagadougou, capital of Burkina Faso, land of men of integrity." His voice echoed crystal clear through the speakers. In Washington, Trump arrived at the CNN studios, accompanied by his security detail. Wearing a dark suit and traditional red tie, he greeted Anderson Cooper with a firm handshake. "Ready for this dialogue?" Cooper asked. "More than ready," Trump replied, sitting in the studio chair. "It will be interesting to talk to this young African leader." On the streets of Ouagadougou, crowds gathered in cafes, squares, and homes to watch their president on international television. It was the first time a Burkinabe leader had participated in a global broadcast of this magnitude. 5 minutes to air, announced CNN's production director. Ibrahim took a deep breath, thinking of his people and the responsibility of representing not just Burkina Faso, but a whole new generation of African leaders determined to be heard. "Good evening. I'm Anderson Cooper, and this is a special edition of CNN International." The host began looking directly into the cameras. "We have with us President Donald Trump here in Washington, and live from Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso." The screen split, showing Trump on the left and Ibrahim on the right. "President Trump, you requested this conversation." "Why?" Cooper began diplomatically. Trump leaned forward. "Anderson, Africa is making questionable decisions. We see countries aligning themselves with China and Russia while ignoring traditional partners like the United States." Ibrahim kept his expression calm, waiting his turn. Trump continued, "Burkina Faso in particular has made choices that are troubling. We hope that young leaders like Traoré will understand where their true interests lie." Cooper turned to the screen. "President Traoré, how do you respond to these concerns?" Ibrahim smiled slightly before replying, "President Trump, with all due respect, Burkina Faso does not align with anyone. We partner on the basis of mutual benefit and respect for our sovereignty," Trump interrupted. "But you are accepting Russian military aid and predatory Chinese loans." The interruption did not faze Ibrahim. "President Trump, in 2023, we requested American military support against terrorism. It took 8 months for only a negative response. Russia responded in 2 weeks with equipment and training." The comment hit home. Trump was visibly irritated. "We have procedures, protocols, and we have terrorists killing our people while protocols are being reviewed," Ibrahim replied calmly. Cooper sensed the growing tension. "President Traoré, what is your view on African partnerships?" "Simple, Anderson. Africa in the 21st century chooses partners who respect us as equals, not as dependent." Trump shook his head. "Equals? You still need basic development assistance." Ibrahim paused, preparing himself for his first devastating response. Ibrahim looked straight into the camera, completely ignoring Trump for a few seconds. "President Trump, since you mentioned development, I'd like to share some numbers that you may not be familiar with." He gestured discreetly, and graphs appeared on the screen, surprising the CNN producers. Since 2022, Burkina Faso has grown economically by 3% per year. We have increased GDP per capita by 34%. We have built 1,500 kilometers of paved roads, 847 schools, and 23 hospitals. Trump tried to interrupt, but Ibrahim continued, "Most importantly, we did this by reducing external dependence by 67%. Today, 78% of our national budget comes from our own resources." Anderson Cooper checked his papers, impressed by the numbers. "President Trump, these indicators are verified by international institutions." Trump looked uncomfortable. "Numbers can be manipulated." "Manipulated?" Ibrahim laughed genuinely. "President Trump, this data was audited by the IMF, the World Bank, and the African Union, institutions that also have American participation." The audience on the streets of Ouagadougou erupted in applause. Ibrahim continued his offensive. "President Trump, you mentioned Chinese predatory lending. Our agreement with China has an interest rate of 1% per year, a 25-year term. I would like to know what rate did American banks offer?" Trump hesitated. That depends on risk analysis. They offered 7. 8%, 8% per year, a 12-year term, with guarantees that would compromise our mineral sovereignty. Ibrahim calmly revealed, President Trump, who exactly is being predatory? The question echoed around the studio. Cooper realized he was witnessing something historic. A young African leader confronting the American president with irrefutable facts. Trump tried to regain control. You don't understand global geopolitics. We understand perfectly, Ibrahim interrupted for the first time. That's why we choose partners who offer us better conditions. The world's public watched this duel of giants, mesmerized. Trump, visibly irritated by Ibrahim's aplomb, decided to toughen his tone. Look, young man, you may have pretty numbers, but you have no real experience in international politics. Ibrahim smiled calmly. President Trump, experience without results is just age. The response was like a punch. Cooper could barely hide a smile. Trump tried to recover. I built a business empire before I was president, and I built a prosperous country while being president, Ibrahim replied instantly. President Trump, with all due respect, when you were my age, you were inheriting businesses from your father. I am building a nation from scratch. Trump blushed. You can't compare. I'm not comparing. I'm contrasting. Ibrahim interrupted him again. You talk about experience. But what experience do you have in fighting terrorism in the Sahel, in reducing extreme poverty, in unifying centuries-old tribes in a common national project? Cooper tried to mediate. President Trump, would you like to respond? This kid is being disrespectful. Trump exploded, completely losing his diplomatic composure. Ibrahim kept his tone calm. Excuse me, President Trump, but disrespect is when the leader of the world's greatest power calls elected presidents boys. The global audience felt silent. Trump realized his mistake, but it was too late. Ibrahim continued, I'm 35 years old. I lead a country of 23 million people. I was democratically elected. I've implemented reforms that have lifted millions out of poverty. If that's what being a boy is, I proudly accept the title. In Washington, Trump's aides made desperate gestures for him to control himself. On the American streets, people watched in disbelief as their president was confronted in this way. Trump tried one last card. You still depend on foreign aid. Wrong again. Ibrahim smiled. Burkina Faso is a net donor to 3 neighboring countries. We export electricity, food, and technical expertise. The impact of the revelation was devastating. Trump was left without an answer for the first time in the interview. Anderson Cooper realized he was witnessing a historic moment in international television. President Traoré, how do you see the future of Africa-US relations? Ibrahim shifted in his chair, preparing for his most impactful statement. Anderson, let me be very clear about something that needs to be said. Trump watched him with growing suspicion. The United States has always treated Africa as a continent to be helped, never as a partner to be respected. That has to change. Ibrahim looked directly at Trump through the screen. President Trump, Africa in the 21st century no longer accepts paternalistic relations. We have 54 countries, 4 billion people, immense natural resources, an educated and enterprising youth. Trump tried to interrupt, but Ibrahim diplomatically raised his hand. Please let me finish. This is important. Africa produces 60% of the world's cobalt, 70% of its gold, 40% of its diamonds. We have the youngest population on the planet. We are the future of the global economy, not your charity project. The global audience was mesmerized. Ibrahim continued, China treats us as trading partners. Russia offers us military cooperation without humiliating conditions. Europe is reviewing its colonial policies. And the United States. They still see us as children in need of guidance. Trump exploded again. You would have nothing without Western help. Ibrahim's response was devastating. President Trump, before colonization, Africa had universities in Timbuktu, while Europe was in the Middle Ages. African kingdoms controlled global trade routes. We were great before Western help, and we will be great again. Cooper could hardly believe what he was witnessing. All over the world, people stopped to watch this epic confrontation. The difference, President Trump, is that now we know our worth, and we no longer accept crumbs disguised as generosity. Trump was completely speechless, staring at Ibrahim with a mixture of shock and irritation. The silence in the CNN studio lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Trump, realizing that he was losing control of the narrative completely, tried a desperate strategy. You talk about independence, but your countries are unstable, corrupt. Ibrahim interrupted him with impressive calm. President Trump, let's talk about stability. New graphs appeared on the screen. Burkina Faso has reduced terrorist attacks by 73% in the last 2 years. Our corruption index has improved 45 places in the international rankings. Our homicide rate has fallen 52%. The Trump was visibly uncomfortable. But now let's compare. Ibrahim continued relentlessly. The United States has 330 million people and 40,000 gun deaths a year. Burkina Faso has 23 million and 1,200 total violent deaths last year. The math was brutal. Cooper checked the numbers in real time with his team. They were all accurate. Ibrahim wasn't finished. President Trump, your country spends $800 billion a year on defense, but fails to protect children in schools. We spend $1 billion and protect our borders from international terrorist groups. The American audience watched in shock. They had never seen their president confronted like this. Trump tried to change the subject. What about human rights? Excellent question. Ibrahim smiled. Burkina Faso has not had the death penalty for 30 years. The United States executed 18 people last year. Who respects human life more? Trump was now clearly panicked. That's different. It's different because we're comparing facts, not narratives. Ibrahim cut him off elegantly. President Trump, you govern a country where 500,000 people live on the streets. Burkina Faso eliminated its homeless population by 2024. Cooper double-checked the number was correct. Trump's humiliation was being broadcast live to 200 countries. Anderson Cooper realized he was watching historic television. Trump looked utterly defeated, but he tried one last attack. You have no technology. You depend on the West for everything. Ibrahim laughed genuinely, as if he had been expecting this very question. President Trump, thank you very much for mentioning technology. He gestured again, and new data appeared on the screen. Burkina Faso has developed the first integrated solar energy system in West Africa. We produce 89% of our electricity through renewable sources. Trump tried to interrupt, but Ibrahim continued. Our Burkina Faso engineers have created irrigation systems that have increased agricultural productivity by 340%. We have exported this technology to 6 African countries. The next revelation was even more shocking. President Trump, Burkina Faso has 4G internet coverage in 94% of the national territory. How much does the United States have? Cooper quickly checked. 78% according to official American data. Trump was clearly in despair. These are fabricated numbers. President Trump, Ibrahim said calmly, this information is available on the official website of the American FCC, an agency of your own government. The blow was fatal. Trump was left speechless once again. Ibrahim decided to finish gracefully. President Trump, I did not come here to humiliate anyone. I came to establish facts. Africa is no longer the continent that needs saving. We are partners that deserve respect. He paused dramatically. You can continue to see Africa through the eyes of the last century while China, Russia, India, and others build the future with us. The choice is America's. Trump mumbled something inaudible. Ibrahim concluded, I invite you to visit Burkina Faso, not as one who comes to teach, but as one who comes to learn. Perhaps you will discover that this unstable continent has valuable lessons in sustainable development, national unity, and shared prosperity. The silence that followed was deafening. Trump had been completely disarmed by a young African leader of 35 years. Anderson Cooper ended the interview with a sense of history in the making. "Mr. President, thank you for this enlightening exchange," he said diplomatically, even though he knew he had just witnessed the most complete televised humiliation of an American president. Immediately after the broadcast ended, social media exploded. "Traoré destroys Trump" trended worldwide in less than 30 minutes. This young African just gave the greatest international politics lesson of the decade. Trump was completely humiliated by a 35-year-old president. What a shame. IBRAHIM Traoré is the leader the world needed. What a devastating response. In W. Washington, the White House was in full crisis mode. Aides scoured through the halls trying to come up with a response that would minimize the disaster. Trump had left the CNN studios visibly shaken, without speaking to reporters on the American streets. The reaction was mixed, but predominantly shocked. Many Americans had never seen their president confronted with such damning facts by a foreign leader. In Burkina Faso, the celebration was total. Crowds took to the streets of Ouagadougou, singing and dancing. Ibrahim had defended not only his country, but the entire African continent with dignity and intelligence. World leaders began calling to congratulate Ibrahim Macron of France. "Your performance was masterful, President Jinping of China. Africa has in you an exceptional spokesperson. Even Putin called you, have shown the world the new Africa." Ibrahim, 3 days after the interview, the consequences were enormous. 5 African countries cancelled trade agreements with American companies. The African Union called an emergency meeting to discuss a new strategy for international partnerships. Burkina Faso received investment proposals from 47 countries in just 72 hours. Ibrahim, ever humble, declared at a local press conference, "I did not fight against America. I fought for African dignity. We want partnership, not paternalism." Ibrahim Traoré's response had truly impacted Trump and shocked the global public, showing that a new Africa had emerged, confident, articulate, and determined to be respected as an equal on the international stage.